Hello, and welcome to a series of common sense videos by me, the Soul Guru, that will explain and seek to solve a series of life's mysteries in a simple and straightforward manner, using logic to draw conclusions and without any Bible bashing in any form. This first video will seek to prove the existence of the soul. Now, the first thing we must do is to define what a soul is. And to do this, I'm using the definition from Collins Dictionary of the spirit part of man, the seat of human personality, intellect, will and emotion, regarded as the entity that survives the body after death. Now, other dictionaries and encyclopedia have similar definitions, so we know this is a global definition of what a soul is, and we know exactly what we are seeking to prove real. The soul is therefore our root consciousness. That is to say, the driver of our minds and as a result our bodies. This soul, in accordance with the definition, becomes detached from our body when we die and continues to exist after our body dies. Now we have our definition, we have to work out how we're going to prove if the soul is real or just a theory that people want to believe, as it's preferable to the finality of death. Now this, of course, is what the scientific community believe is the reason why 3/4 of the world's population persistently believe in the existence of a soul, despite their contention otherwise. Okay, for exhibit 1 here we've got my smallest son Tom, and he's pretty amazing. Now we're not talking today about his body, which is miraculous enough in itself. We're talking today about his consciousness. That bit of him that drives his mind, that's the seat of his personality, that we humans describe, for want of a better word, as a soul. And this soul is the reason why Tom can love and laugh, and why he can experience a wide range of emotions, too numerous to mention in this video. And for one day at least, I hope, he'll be able to appreciate art, music, poetry, etc., and the beauty of the world around him. Okay, this soul is the reason why he has a free will, and that free will allow him to behave in a way that's either what he knows to be good or bad, and even in a way, more importantly perhaps, that's not in the best interests of his personal survival. He'll be able to make these decisions by weighing up the external influences of the world around him, and at the same time balancing it with his morality and his conscience. And this conscience will talk to him in a form of a voice inside of him and hopefully guide those decisions. Now, the way the soul works is that his decisions will be swayed but not commanded by his conscience, because he's got a free will. Now, this means his morality, which is seated within his soul, will tell him when he's right or wrong, and if he'll suffer remorse if he chooses not to follow his conscience, though ultimately he'll be left to decide for himself whether or not to take the usually more difficult path that his morality tells him he should take. Now, I'm quite grateful for this, because his conscience guiding his decisions, if it wasn't for that, when he's older and no longer needs his parents, for example, for his survival, he'd be killing me and his mum off, so that he'll be getting the inheritance earlier, or he'll be killing his children when they become a burden to him. Okay, when Tom goes into a room, he can intuitively know how other people are feeling through empathy, and he can respond then with a wide range of sensitive emotions. When he's older, he can have honour, and he can be polite and courteous to others even when it's not in his best interest to do so. He can be selfless and forgiving, and he's also got an imagination as well, which can open up his mind to other possibilities, such as the spiritual world or such as aliens or all sorts. And it's this intuitive mind of human beings that, even for scientists, is the root of their future discoveries and their future research. It's this intuition that's the beginning of research. Okay, the next step in realizing that it is very likely that soul exists is to understand that there's a scientifically proven universal law that in the world around us nothing is ever destroyed but exists in a different form. Now, just like you, when I went to school, I studied the main sciences, which is chemistry, physics and biology. I noticed, as you may have noticed, that there are similar laws that are common to all three sciences, and these laws conclude that nothing in the universe is ever destroyed, but it exists in a different form. For example, in chemistry, there's a rule known as the conservation of mass, which states that matter can neither be created nor destroyed, but exists in a different form. This means that no matter what chemical reaction happens or occurs, the chemical equations must balance, because matter is never destroyed. Now, similarly in physics, there's a rule of conservation of energy, or to quote Einstein himself, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be changed from one form of energy to another. We have Tom, and Tom is going to push this box across the floor. Go on then, Tom. Okay, now, the energy that he uses is transformed into heat, which is lost through friction underneath the box, and it pushes the air out of the way on the other side of the box, causing like a domino effect in the air around us. But nothing's lost. That's the important thing to know. The energy just exists in a different form. Now, similarly in biology, we know of the circle of life. We know that plants die, and they in turn feed future generation of plants. We know about the reproduction life of animals, etc. Similarly, if Tom gives me a glass of water, alright, okay. Alright, that's enough. I've been looking forward to doing that. Some of the water will evaporate from me, and it'll end up in clouds and come down as rain, and still more will be mopped up with me by me in a minute. It'll go down the drain and then go into the rivers and then finally the sea. And it stands to reason that if everything around us in this universe follows this rule, then, and that nothing is ever destroyed but exists in a different form, then it is very likely that our consciousness itself will follow the same rule. Okay, although we can be proud of our scientific progress, we should also at the same time be aware of its limitations. The greatest of these limitations is probably its lack of understanding in our humanity. Now, we should remember that billions of computer programmers around the world can't reproduce any of the soul's behaviour that we've described up until now. Human beings do some very unusual things that defy logic. All computers can ever hope to do is to try and imitate human reactions rather than have those reactions themselves. Perhaps more than this though, the soul is why Tom's alive. It is his life force, and once it leaves him, his body would be dead. We should remember that science can't bring so much as a one-celled animal like an amoeba back to life once it's died. Everything's there, materially of course, but science is not able to breathe life back into anything that's died. The conclusion for all of these things so far that we've mentioned must at least mean that science is missing something, that there's a gap in scientific knowledge that's preventing it from doing and understanding these things. So, why hasn't science detected a soul yet? And is what we've mentioned so far scientific proof? Now, while the term scientific proof is often used in popular media, many scientists argue there's no such thing because new evidence is constantly changing what is considered to be scientific law. This being the case, the most we can ever definitively say is that there are facts as far as current scientific understanding suggests. To prove that this is not a cop-out, I'm going to assume that scientific law is a constant and follow the well-established procedure how scientific proof is established. Now, this scientific procedure begins with a theory that satisfies unknown phenomena, which in turn leads to investigation and experiment and finally evidence that gradually turns that theory into scientific law. If we apply this procedure to the theory that a soul and spiritual universe exists, we can produce a hypothesis that fills the gaps in scientific knowledge that we have already established, as well as many others. Examples are running across your screen now. So we have satisfied the procedure so far by establishing a theory that satisfies unknown phenomena. Now we need evidence. Now the first piece of evidence has to be that the acceptance of a soul satisfies the already established scientific law that nothing is created nor destroyed but exists in a different form. The second is that the acceptance fills the gaps in scientific knowledge that we've already established, like a missing piece of a jigsaw puzzle. These two facts alone are normally enough to establish scientific proof, but we have to take into account that the spiritual world is unable to be detected by current scientific instruments. So how can evidence be obtained when science cannot see the spiritual world? Well, science does not necessarily need to see in order to build up evidence. For example, the way that chemicals react and bond with one another led to the theory of valence. Now, experimentation determined how chemicals bonded with one another long before the invention of the electron microscope, when scientists could confirm the theories with their own eyes. So the evidence of probability and hypothesis is indeed very common in scientific evidence, even when the evidence cannot be seen at first hand. So why can't science detect the soul or a spiritual universe? To understand this, we have to understand where the soul exists. And to begin to understand that question, we have to first look at the theory of where the soul exists. The idea of the existence of a soul is almost universally accepted across all religions, which is about the only thing they do agree on. Now, this universal acceptance also suggests that a common spiritual experience has been noted by all the religious leaders in the past. All of these leaders say that the soul exists in what they understand to be a spiritual universe that occupies the same space as ours. In other words, in a spiritual world that exists in a different dimension. But can this dimension be real? Well, the answer to this is yes, because quantum physicists who study our microscopic world have recently come across phenomena that can only be mathematically proven by the acceptance of other, as yet undiscovered dimensions. This has led to two theories known as string and M theories, which show that there are 10 and 11 dimensions respectively that we're still currently unaware of. Now, this means that science accepts that there may be other dimensions that they are as yet unable to detect. These are dimensions where, in theory at least, a spiritual universe could exist. Now, another reason why science has not been able to prove the existence of a soul is a far simpler one. And that is that science does not want to prove it, but rather actively seeks to disprove the existence of a spiritual world. An excellent example of this can be found in the Guinness Book of Records 1970, and please feel free to confirm this and all the other information I've given you so far for yourself. Now, this official record shows that a man called Pavel Stepanek completed an extrasensory perception test under laboratory conditions that involved guessing random cards. I'm sure you've seen it on programs and what have you. He reached such a high score that the likelihood of him guessing them by chance was 1 in, let me get this right, 112,589,906,824,464. Now, though this is no more remarkable than the scientist's conclusion that there must be something wrong with the laws of probability rather than consider it is possible that ESP was real. Now, this denial of a spiritual world by the scientific community is not unusual, and thousands of examples can be found if you look around that show that scientists is almost scared of the possibility that a spiritual world might exist. Now, science is only 150 years old or so, and the scientific fact is constantly changing. The fact that the spiritual world cannot be seen does not have to be an obstacle for a hypothesis to be drawn. It is our scientists' denial that is the only reason why the hypothesis has not already been drawn by science. Now, although science is capable of discovering evidence of a spiritual world, I'm going to surprise you now by requesting that they never try. The reason why I would ask the scientific community not to try is because there's one last major reason why proof has not been found to verify the existence of the spiritual world. And that is because the spiritual world itself does not wish to be revealed. Now, there's a very good reason for this that involves the need for the human soul to mature and discover the spiritual world for itself and take the so-called leap of faith, which you can't really do if the existence of a spiritual world was verified by science. Though I'm not going to go into this, the whys and wherefores, because the explanation really comes under a different video subject matter. Now, there are two likely reactions to this video by you or the people around you. One would be that this evidence is ample proof to verify the existence of a soul, and the other is that this evidence is not nearly enough proof. Now, these two extremes of reactions are because some people are aware of their soul's existence and can feel the truth, so don't really need much convincing, while others are so attached to the physical world that no amount of proof will ever be enough for them. Try it for yourself if you don't believe me with your family and friends. So, in conclusion, there is scientific proof for the soul's existence, and that proof is evidence for all to see, but can only be seen by those who are at least partially aware of the existence of the soul in the first place. Though we really must remember that this has been designed this way for a reason, and so should not be interfered with under any circumstances. I will incidentally be answering the big question, but I have to make a couple of videos on other more pressing subject matters first, so please be patient. This is the Soul Guru signing off. Until next time. Goodbye.